All right, welcome to the Global Phys Ed Boxcast. Tonight on the show, I'm really excited to be talking to a legend in the world of health and physical education, Dr. Robert Pangrazi. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm happy to be able to join you.
All right, so I wanted to start off with a little bit of background. Now, you've had a tremendous career in education. You've written over 50 books, been published in over 150 research articles. How did you start off in education? What sparked that interest in you in education, and specifically physical education?
Well, I had a very normal start. I went to Washington State University, and I wanted to be a high school coach, and went there, and they sent me out to observe in an elementary school, of which I was sort of offended at the time because I wanted to be a high school coach, and that was that. And I went to the elementary school, and there were a couple of principals and teachers that really impressed me and pushed me to become a elementary classroom teacher. Simultaneously, I took my first PE class from Dr. Victor P. Dower, who later took me on as a co-author and really gave me my start in this field. I really owe him a tremendous debt of gratitude because he really gave me a start, and I appreciate him more than he'll ever know. But I taught fifth grade, and Vic Dower got a ESEA grant and asked me if I wanted to be the physical education specialist and in the elementary program. And I said, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea. And went to work in that. I taught in the Pullman schools for 7 years, and also served as the director of elementary PE, or of K through 12 PE in the Pullman schools. And at the same time, I worked on my master's and doctorate, and of course had Vic Dower as a chair of my committees and that. So he was terribly influential in my life, and I owe him a great deal of gratitude. When I finished my doctorate, then I applied for jobs around the country, and that's how I ended up at Arizona State University in 1973.
All right, so if you could just kind of take us back to your first year as a physical education teacher, what were some of the challenges that you saw coming from the classroom and trying to transitioning into the gym?
Well, to be honest with you, in all of education, I felt like I wasn't prepared all that well at the university to teach. I mean, when I went into the fifth grade classroom, I was nervous and scared. There was so much I didn't know and didn't understand, and my methods classes hadn't covered none of that and didn't tell me how to handle kids, really. It was more about content and curriculum in that. So I really felt uneasy. And then I went in to teach PE, and I'd never taught a day of elementary PE. But I was working with Vic, and we explored together, and I think that was the greatest start of my career. I was able to try things and fail, and we had money to buy equipment and try different units of instruction and base them on one single thing. Were they useful in the scheme of skill development and fitness and activity for kids, and were they beneficial for kids? And that was the criteria we primarily used in picking activities. And Vic had spent a year overseas in Europe, traveling, picking up a lot of European ideas. So when you look at my program, the dynamic PE program still is filled with a lot of European influence because of his travels for a year on sabbatical. So again, I didn't know how to handle students in that setting. I wasn't sure how much you could demand of them. I wasn't sure about what fitness should be. I'd heard a lot about fitness testing and a lot of things like that were big at the time when I started. But I really didn't know a lot about elementary PE, and I'll be honest, I learned on the job. What that did was say to me, I need to go into teacher training. I want to train teachers because I've found that I didn't know anything about teaching when I left the College of Education. And I don't mean to indict them. I'm just being brutally honest. I didn't know how to teach and discipline and manage kids, as well as know what should be taught. And if you look back at the time, elementary physical education has since matured, and I would say is much more mature than secondary PE. Much more has happened in elementary PE, and it's come a long ways. But at the time, elementary PE wasn't even recognized. There weren't even elementary PE programs. And Vic Dower was one of the few people who was teaching specifically elementary PE. So a lot has changed since then, but my experiences and my failures and my weaknesses motivated me highly to become a person who wanted to train teachers.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question. How did that influence you as far as being a teacher who trains teachers now? How did that influence your perspective on these new teachers going into the field and kind of being shocked at the reality versus the theory, right? How did that influence you? And do you give your students kind of like that trial and error kind of mentality?
I do both. But let me back up to your question, because I think it's a good one. I have always said that first 7 years of my career in the public schools was the cornerstone of everything I did in my career. I don't know whether I would have ever gone on to accomplish in this profession had it not been for that. And I've always been dismayed, and it's happening more than ever, when people can go into a doctoral program planning on training teachers and they've never taught children. And it kills me. I just will never accept it. I took on a co-author, Aaron Beatley, and he came to me and said he wanted to come and study for a doctorate. And I said, have you taught in the public schools? And he said, no. And I said, I won't take you then. You have to get at least 2 years of experience. He went back and got 2 years of experience. And, I think his record speaks for itself as to how he's done. So the experience of being with children, knowing children, and being able to tell future teachers what kids are like, there's only one way to get it, and that's to have an experience with them. You have to live with them. You have to feel with them. You have to hurt with them. You have to smile with them. And you have to understand what they're going through. And I sometimes think now teacher trainers are coming up with all these ideas, not based on what's good for kids, which should be the underlining criteria forever. Schools are about kids. And I just feel that my initial experience was formative, and it determined who I would be in the profession. And I rely on that experience every day of my life, whether I'm writing, researching, or teaching.
All right. So in all that experience that you have, like you said, you had experience in the classroom, you had experience as a physical education teacher, and now, on the university level. I think the big question is, what is physical education and what role does it serve in the school system? And I think a lot of times we get confused as far as what physical education can do in that school system. And there's a lot of different ideas out there. So in your opinion and in your vast experience, what is that role of physical education in the school system?
Well, it's a huge question. It's
Right.
a great question, but it's a huge question. But I'm going to boil it down because I'm working on a paper right now that I'm going to present this fall and speak about in a number of situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I always go back to my roots when I want to speak. And let's just deal with what you asked. What is physical education? I think the profession has lost its way. I think that we've become so enamored with all the things along the way that we've changed what we believe in about every 3 to 5 years. And there's a lot of PE teachers out there who believe that when a new idea comes along and a new director of PE comes in and says, we're going to try this for the next 3 to 5 years, I think they sit there thinking, well, if we just wait 3 years, it'll go away. And we can continue to do what we've always done. And sadly, our profession, that's what happens, is that people continue to do what they've always done. What are we? What are we? Are we movement education? Are we physical fitness? Are we physical activity? Are we perceptual motor programs? Are we technology? Are we accountability? Are we assessment? We don't know who we are, because every time something new comes along, we get a few people who want to throw out everything, go hog wild after that, and lose sight of what PE is about. And I could go back and show you how research has shown that all those avenues where we've moved left to right away from the core of PE has been of no benefit to our profession. So that when you ask people or tell people what you teach, they'll say, oh, you teach physical education. What sport do you coach? And they have no idea that physical education is completely different from sport. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, all right, I asked him what PE is. All right, here I come. Okay, I haven't forgotten your question. In my mind, when I boil it all down, PE is about skill development, about physical activity promotion, and about learning the experience and participating in physical fitness activities. I didn't say developing high levels of physical fitness. I didn't say developing high levels of skill. I didn't say high levels of activity, but rather bringing kids into that arena and focusing our program so that we teach kids a wide array of skills, a wide array of activities they can leave school with, and understand that fitness is the most personal thing of all the things we do in the gymnasium or the activity arena. It's so personal, so dictated by genetics, that no matter what we do, we'll never get the vast majority of kids fit through PE. So that to me is what PE is about. Now you say, well, why is that? Why shouldn't it be about technology? Why shouldn't it be about character development? Why shouldn't it be about some of these things? Oh, I'm all for using these kinds of things. I have absolutely no problem with using them in our profession and making good use of them. In fact, I think it's a good idea, but it should not be the focus of the program. It should be an ally of the program. It should make the program better. In other words, what you choose to use in PE to teach skills and activity promotion, it should augment that, not become the focus of it. And I think that's the part that concerns me, is that we've lost sight of who we are, and some teachers decide, well, you know, I've tried that, I've tried this, I think I'm just going to roll out the ball, I've had enough. And we get discouraged about what we're doing, and I don't think we can do that. But I think the vast majority of people aren't sure who they are, and I'm going to say it softly but directly, because people know that's who I am. I think even our professional organizations have lost us and directed us down the wrong track. And I love the people I've worked with, and I love the people who give time to our professional organizations. They're really trying, but they're always trying to find the easy fix. The thing that someone will say, some superintendent will say, aha, this makes kids read better. Oh, it's going to develop their brains, and they're going to be academically brilliant now. And they're looking for the quick fix that makes PE important. Just let me say this. If we don't get kids to be active, if we don't teach kids about fitness, if we don't teach skills, who's going to do it?
Right.
It's not the classroom teacher. The only focus of our program, and the only thing we can uniquely add to the school curriculum, are the three things I just said. If it's character development, other teachers can do that. If it's social development, other teachers in the school can do that. If it's technology, other teachers in the school teach technology. Why do we think we have to do everything the classroom teacher is doing when they don't do what we're doing? We're unique. We're special. We change a school. There's nothing more important than a great physical educator doing great things in that school. They become the focal point of the school. They make that school active and alive and full of energy. They're so important. But too often, we're trying to do the things that classroom teachers can do a lot better because, number one, they were trained for it, and number two, they have a setting where it's much easier to teach it. So if you think that works me up, you got it.
I love it. I love the energy. Okay, so let me ask you about skill development, because that was one of the three, right? So
yes.
A lot of times in physical education, we only see our kids maybe once a week.
Yeah.
Some people have huge classes,
Yes.
and we know we need the time for the students to actually develop that skill. So what advice would you give to a teacher who might not have the time and has these enormous classes in terms of skill development?
You know, we really have to be realistic about that. And I am realistic about all the things you said. Even if you have PE twice a week, even if you have PE 5 times a week, even if you have small classes and PE 5 times a week, you can't expect to assume the level that a coach does when he picks the elite kids and then spends hours after hours and trains them year round anymore. Of course they reach high levels of performance. That tells you something. I want kids to reach a level of performance where they look at it and they get some perceived competence. They say, wow, I like bouncing the ball. I think I'm pretty good at it. Wow, I like tossing the beanbag. I can catch it. Oh, wow, I like hula hooping. I can move my hips in a way in which I can get that hoop going. And they get some perceived competence that they can move, that they can do some things, that they fail at some, do well at others. That, to me, is what PE is about, because we're never going to build skilled performers. And I ask the question, when you look at music, do you really think the music teachers make great musicians out of every kid that takes music, band, or anything else? No. I mean, they don't at all. They don't even get close. If you want to be great, number one, you got to be born great. And number two, you got to have great teachers that do only music teaching. It's the same thing with art teachers. You look at art teachers, they don't make great artists of everybody. Most of us in PE can't hardly draw stick figures. So obviously the art teacher didn't succeed with us. It's one of those things where I think we have to be realistic what we can do in that setting and not lose hope. And that is get kids turned on to activity and skills and grow a little perceived competence that says inside, gosh, I kind of like this. I found something I can do. I'm not very good at bouncing the ball, but you gave me some balance activities, and I can do those things. Or I'm not very good at catching, but I sure am good at kicking and playing kick games. You know, we're also different. That elementary PE and middle school PE is about expanding the horizon and giving kids an opportunity to be successful at something, not everything. And too often kids are in PE and they expect that they should be good at everything. And there's only a few people who were genetically gifted that are going to be good at everything. I'm still with you.
Okay, yeah, we lost you for a second, but we got you.
Okay, good. So anything else on that? I lost my train of thought there, but I think I pretty much dealt with what we were saying with the business of getting kids. Perceived competence is a lot more important than actual competence. In other words, actual competence is how good you are at catching. Perceived competence is how you feel about yourself and your catching. And if we can get kids to feel good about themselves and catching or throwing or running or whatever, and not put them into a situation where they fail all the time, I think we'll make it a good environment. And that's why my program's so skill oriented and less on games and sports, because games and sports makes it very clear who the gifted and the non-gifted are.
See, and I was going to ask about that as well, because I think you're right. With the perceived competence, the individual will be more likely to participate in all kinds of different activities because they feel like they have some kind of ability to do so. So, where does the enjoyment come in? So, we also have to create this environment where the students can enjoy the activities that they're doing, because obviously, if they keep failing, then they're not going to enjoy it. So, where does joy come into that equation?
Joy is huge. Joy is huge. I always say the difference between a youngster and an adult is that if the adult doesn't like it, they quit. The kid can't. He has to sit there and put up with it and have the teacher, maybe chirping at him or something, keep your eye on it, watch this, do that, do this. I mean, the beautiful thing about an adult, they just quit. Most adults tell kids not to be quitters, but most adults are quitters. They only do the things they're good at doing, and they avoid the things they're not good at doing. So enjoyment is huge. Mm-hmm. But, again, if I go back to my curriculum, and of course I'm going to talk about me at this point because it's what I know best. I'm not saying it's the best curriculum or the one you have to use. That's not my point here. Mm-hmm. My point is to say, if you look at my curriculum, I teach everything, and every unit of activity is organized from the easiest activity that every kid, I guarantee you, can do, regardless of ability. And then they get more difficult and more trying down the scale of that list of activities. And when you look at kids, the less gifted youngster won't go as far down that continuum. And the more gifted youngster will be down here instead of moving everybody lockstep at the same speed. When I look at a good lesson being taught, I see a teacher on the move telling a youngster who's succeeding, try this one, try that one. Wow, you did that one. Hey, stay with the other one. You were having success with it. Why don't you keep working on it a little bit longer and feel good about it? See how many you think you can accomplish. And you take kids at different places. There's no way a PE program should ever move people at the same speed. And I think that's been one of the great problems with our profession is we want to have everybody do the same number of push-ups, everybody run the same distance, everybody do the same activities, everybody play the same game, and it just doesn't work well. We're so unique, and we've just failed to look at the uniqueness of kids in a physical education setting.
So you talked a little bit about Shape America a little before, and you mentioned they've done some amazing work, and they have some great stuff out there. But kind of on the same lines as you were talking about how everybody is kind of standardized in some of these programs, do you think, where do you see the Shape America national standards being? Do you see them as a guideline that people can kind of get information from? Because I feel like a lot of programs, like you said, kind of try to standardize everybody instead of going to the individual. So how could we use the information that Shape America is putting out, specifically the Shape America national standards?
Well, I think the Shape standards are magnificent. I think it's a body of good work. I've used them in my textbook. I use them in my speaking. I think it's a good body of work. The 5 standards are terrific. I will say this, if you look at the 5 standards, you know what they focus on? The things I just said, the 3 most important things in PE plus social development. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at the standards, they say exactly what we're doing. And then when I go to conventions or hear others speak, they're really not designing a program that's designed to reach those standards, because they're picking up this game here and that game here. I am so tired of going to a convention and seeing a teacher with a brand new game. Isn't this a neat game? And it's a game maybe that is 60 years old that people haven't seen for a while. There's only a certain number of ball games. There aren't all that many unique games, but PE becomes games that we play all the time to try to just have fun. And that's not skill development. When you get into a game, by its very nature, most often it has some aspect of competition in it. And if competition lowers the level of performance in kids who aren't gifted, cooperation, when they work together, raises their level of performance. And remember, you can't play a game unless you've learned to cooperate. So in the early years with kids, we need a lot of cooperative games and stay away from the competitive things where you're trying to get a ball in a basket and do this and that. Now, nobody loves competition more than me. I competed forever, and I still compete in arenas where I can. So that isn't the issue, but I think the issue is the standards are very good. What I do think is if you look at math and reading and some of the science, some of the academic areas, they do have guidelines for where we should be going. In other words, what is the body of knowledge and the body of activity? What is a physical literacy that we really want kids to learn? And there's nothing, the association has never picked up on that and said, there are some things that should be in the curriculum. Let me try this on you. I'm a math teacher, and I'm in the 5th grade, teaching the 5th grade classroom, teaching kids. And I say to myself, I'm just not very good at fractions. So the heck with it. I'm not teaching fractions to my kids. And I don't care whether my kids learn fractions or not. Now, come on. Do you think parents would scream if a teacher said, I don't teach fractions and I don't teach multiplication tables because I'm not good at those things? And yet in PE, we do the same thing. We teach the things we know well, and we don't reach out and try a lot of things. There's no curriculum that is broader than dynamic PE. You have to be able to teach a lot of things, and it takes a lot of equipment and a lot of hard work. And I will never back down from that, because PE teachers need equipment, and PE teachers need to work hard, and PE teachers need to offer a wide array of activities because you have a wide array of kids with whole different interests. So I'm not saying it should be lockstep. I never will say that. But the flip side is there has to be a roadmap to know where we're going and what we want to do for kids and when we get there. And if we don't have that, it's what should we do today is the curriculum. Then I don't know how we know where we're going and where we're ever going to amount to anything important where superintendent says, what are you teaching next week? Well, I got to think about it. I haven't decided yet. How can we not know what we're going to teach during the school year? How can we not know what it is we want to go? And then we say, oh, darn, I skipped fractions. Well, I'll catch it next year.
Or a lot of times on social media, you'll see somebody throw out a new game and the comments below are like, oh, I'm going to do that tomorrow. And it's kind of the same thing. How do you not know what you're doing tomorrow?
Exactly. And it's why I think we're very, very weak as a profession, because we don't have a body of physical literacy that we want kids to know. And we don't have any tools for getting there. And I've often thought that could have been done. And I don't think it'll ever be done by a large body. You're going to have to get together a few elite people and a few practical people and put it together. But it would only be a guide. And before someone gets all excited, just let me say this. Some people say, well, Pangrazi, your teachers are all like robots. You might know that when I say I want teachers to know where they're going, that people might say that they're all teaching the same thing. When it comes to the Mesa PE program that I originated many, many years ago, there's about 85 teachers. If you were to go watch the 85 teachers, none of them teach the same way. None of them. They teach the same content. They know what to teach, but they all teach differently. Nobody can take away your creativeness as a teacher, and I don't want to. I want you to put your spin on it and be you. I don't want you to be Bob or anybody else. Lord knows one Bob is enough.
So I wanted to ask you, you talked about using them as a guideline, having a sort of a roadmap with the destination kind of being physical literacy. And that's kind of a new term that's popped up in the last few years. What are your feelings about physical literacy being that destination? And is it even attainable?
Once again, I'm not one to hop on words, and we like to find a unique word and then say this is it. If you notice, there's less talk about physical literacy now than there was 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's another one of those things that comes along the way. I personally will always think that we should be about physical education and educating kids physically, but that there should be skills and activity habits and fitness habits that kids know how to get there. It's conceptual learning, and I've always been for that. But just like when conceptual learning became big and things like fitness for life, then a lot of people were throwing out the PE program and teaching fitness for life. And I think we will always need a physical education program. Where are kids going to get that? And it scares me about our profession, because I think one of the things that may happen and where they may get it is we're going to start hiring people and private companies to come in and do it. And there won't be physical education teachers anymore because we didn't teach what it was. If you hire somebody as a private company, you can tell them what it is you want them to teach. And if they can't teach it, you go get another company. That's the downside with teachers. You get a PE teacher, you can't fire them unless they do something immoral or illegal. And so I'm not so sure. I worry a little bit because I love teachers and I want PE teachers to be the cornerstone of the school. But I worry sometimes that just like after school programs have been farmed out to private companies, I don't think that's been a rousing success. That's a whole different story, and I don't want to go down that road. But I could see it happening in PE, and I do know some places, and I've worked with a couple companies in California that do farm out PE teachers and people who can do it and do it privately.
Yeah, and do you think that's a product of I guess the administration of that school just not valuing PE? And if so, then how do we flip that? How do we change that around so that they do kind of see an importance in what we do?
Well, yes, I agree with you. I agree with your take on it, that it is a result of not being valued in the school. Because when there's a great PE teacher in the school, and there are a lot of great PE teachers, I love PE teachers, and there's a lot of great ones, and I'm not doing that. I will say the sad part of any profession is we're always judged by the poorest of the lot. So the poorest PE teachers are what people look at when they say, we don't need a PE program. Look at what they're doing. All they do is roll out the ball and they do this, instead of picking a great teacher and looking at all the great things they do. But I think I think you sell your program by showing that you work just as hard as classroom teachers, that you hold your kids accountable just as much as classroom teachers have to hold their kids accountable, that you use assessment instruments, but not over amount, because you still need the most time for activity and skill development, but that you do some along the way. And then you volunteer to be an integral part of that school. When I talk about health and PE, I always say that the PE teacher should be the activity coordinator for the school. They should be the person who's in charge of activity. And do you know, a lot of times when I go in and work with the school and I say, let's get an activity champion going in this school. Well, who's the natural? Who would you think it would be? It'd be the PE teacher, but they don't want to do it. And so it becomes a classroom teacher. And of course, then principal starts to ask, well, what do I need a PE teacher for if they won't even be the activity champion of the school?
Right. So you mentioned accountability, and I want to talk a little bit about that as well. So, I mean, we do live in an era of data-driven teaching and instruction, and we're always looking at, accountability measures. And I think that's sometimes real difficult to do for some physical education teachers. So, with accountability in mind, how do you think we can accurately and meaningfully assess our kids in PE?
Well, I think first of all, accurately is a word you got to be careful about because all of assessment is not highly accurate.
Hmm.
Okay, even in the other areas, we make lots of errors of judgment, and when we're assessing, if there's numbers involved, like math, yeah, that's a little easier, but there's still errors in that, and that's why we have standard deviation scores because we're looking at, how far the range of scores were and how accurate it was in in predicting what it is we wanted. But we need to make an effort to assess. But we have to be careful about how much we do that. We just developed a new curriculum called ASAP. It's going to be on the Gopher website and it's free of charge. And what it is basically my dynamic physical education curriculum that I've uploaded. And it's a year of lesson plans and assessment instruments. Aaron Beatley and I worked on it, and that's on the web right now. We don't have all the kinks worked out of it, but people will have a year's curriculum that they can modify to make it any way they want. And there's 6 different types of assessment tools there for all the different lesson focus activities. Some are teacher questionnaires, some are student questioning students. Others are bike rack like where you go in and reinforce and look at a lot of different things. Others are check off things, self-evaluation instruments. So there are lots of instruments that we've put in throughout our curriculum that you can do in a very short time. Many of them, as they head out the door, they tap on the chart and say, yes, I did that. No, I didn't. And there are just so many things you can have. Raise your hands and have self-questioning. There are just so many things you can do in a hurry without selling out on your PE program. I don't think we can get back to the point of, for example, that was another thing when we went to individualized instruction, and that was big. We would take throwing, for example, and break it down into a rubric and have 3 or 4 different elements and then check every kid to see if they did all the elements. Well, one of the things I say is you break down the elements of throwing, like picking an apple and then stepping toward the target and then rotating and then following through, and you use those 4 things. Kid may do all 4 of those things and still not be able to throw worth the darn.
Right.
So we got to be careful what we're doing. And I think that's where your point of accuracy and meaningfulness comes into effect. I think you make a great point on that. And I would agree with you, but it can be done quickly. And it doesn't have to be done all the time in every unit. In fact, you can over-assess. And I would remind you this also. When we have such a small amount of time in PE with kids, when you are assessing, kids are not learning. Now, just bear in mind, when you assess anybody, that's not learning. That's regurgitating what you already know. And so every time you take a chunk of time to assess, you're taking away time that they could be practicing, learning, receiving instruction. So I ask you to be very judicious and very careful about how much you assess. Do I value it? Well, I wouldn't put it in the curriculum if I didn't, would I? But I would tell you to be really, really careful about it and not overuse it.
And I think the thing also about assessment is that it also requires you to give the students feedback. So in your opinion, what would be that best way to quickly give the students feedback when you're assessing? And is there a way to include that feedback in the activities that the kids are doing so that it's sort of like a natural feedback so they can be learning from their, I guess, trial and error, and it doesn't necessarily always have to come from the teacher?
Oh, well, I think you hit a lot of things in one thing, and I agree with everything you've said. Just about, I would say yes to everything, every point you made, because I think you were right on. Let me tell you that I think some of the greatest assessment comes from the greatest of teachers who don't kill the grass. In other words, they're on the move,
Mm.
and they're going from kid to kid, giving them feedback. And we monitor our teachers and see how many moves and quadrants they make and how many feedback statements they've given to kids, because the very best feedback is not group feedback. In fact, that's only meaningful for probably 20% of your kids. The very best feedback is when it's one-on-one, when you look at me and say, Bob, you weren't catching with your fingertips. That is absolutely, you assessed what I was doing and you immediately gave me feedback from it. Or you can do some reciprocal learning, just like you said. You can have students, you can give them 3 or 4 points you want them to look at, and then have them key on that, and they give that to students. So there are lots of ways you can integrate it into activity and integrate it into learning and practice sessions, that it doesn't have to take away from the learning process. And to me, the very best feedback comes from a teacher on the move, totally involved in the learning, having kids practicing at different rates in different places, but giving them the kind of feedback they need as they practice.
All right, so I wanted to get your take also on fitness testing. So fitness testing is one of those things that some states are required to do, just like here in Texas. We're required to use a fitness fitness tests, and especially at the elementary level, there seems to be a little bit of a problem with that. The kids personally anyway, I feel like some of these tests aren't necessarily accurate for that grade level, or not necessarily appropriate for that grade level. But yet some administrators insist on using that as an accountability measure, not only for the students, but also for the teachers. So how do you feel about that? Where does that fit in?
Well, first of all, just let me clarify by saying I love fitness.
Mm-hmm.
If you know my lesson plan format and my curriculum, you know that about 20 to 25% of the entire curriculum is devoted to fitness experiences. I want kids to experience fitness. Fitness activities are important. And fitness testing can be an experience, but it's all in how it's done. And I must say that, I was on the FitnessGram board for many years, and they've made many efforts to make it much more friendly to kids. But formal fitness testing, I still believe, and I used to go round and round with the FitnessGram board, and if they're listening to this, they're probably cussing me again, because with elementary kids, I think is where the rub lies. And we have, if you've noticed, they've made a lot of changes. They don't advocate testing before the 4th grade and doing some things like that. So I think there are a lot of things that they're doing right. I could give you all kinds of evidence why I think it's a waste of time. And it takes away a lot of time from the PE program and the kind of things we want to do, particularly when a teacher foolishly spends 2-3 weeks on it, getting the testing done, because they only see the kids once or twice a week, and then they do another 3 weeks in the fall. They've just used over 1/6 of their curriculum on fitness testing, of which kids are learning nothing about PE and skills and all the rest that should be there. So I am a huge fitness advocate, and I like fitness. The kind of fitness that I do advocate for elementary kids is all self-testing. Anybody that knows me and has been to my workshops where I talk about fitness self-testing knows I put out signs. I let kids work on their own, either alone or with a partner. It's their choice, because if you're 50 pounds overweight, why would you want to work with a partner who's not overweight and very gifted? I want you to be able to have the privacy of your own. Fitness results are for you and you only, as far as I'm concerned. It's very personal information. And why do we need to fitness test and see how fast, how many laps a kid can make in the pacer, or how many push-ups a kid can do? if he's 50 pounds overweight? We already know they're unfit. Why do we need to test them to find that out? In fact, I could make the argument that fitness testing is for gifted kids, because they're the ones that end up doing it and feeling great. And everybody looks at them and says, wow, you're really something, man. You did a lot. So I think you have to be really careful about it. I'm not so rash as to say we won't have any contact with it. I'd like kids to see it. I'd like them to self-test. And if they want to self-test in the push-ups and they find they can't do any, but on their card they want to write down that they did 2,420, I could care less. I want them to get the experience, because I want something starts clicking that maybe I do need to do this. But let's be honest, as a PE teacher, in fact, I could even say as a classroom teacher, are you really going to tell me that you can't look out at 30 kids, at 60 kids, and point out the kids that aren't fit to me? Come on. You can do that in 3 minutes. So why are we using that as an accountability measure? And then when we know that fitness is 50 to 60% controlled by genetics, how could we ever start to grade teachers on something that they can't control? Once again, it's trying to make a great artist out of every kid. And we've never been able to do that. We don't tell the art teacher, if every one of your kids don't produce a masterpiece, you're not getting a merit raise. Right. Come on. Let's have a little common sense here. And, you know, for gifted kids, there are so many opportunities and places for them to go. And boy, my love and my plea for PE, it's for the kid who may never have a chance to be active again if I don't get them going. And they may get turned off, and they may say for the rest of their life they hated activity, they hated PE, they couldn't do anything, and their perceived competence is, I'm a big, fat loser. And they may never get out of that cycle. I'm not willing to risk that for the sake of fitness testing every kid, or going through high levels of skill testing of every kid and finding out that 90% of them can't throw maturely. You knew that ahead of time. And the reason the principal uses it is because they don't have any other tool. Now I'm going to take you down a different avenue. Now I'm going to talk pedometers. Now I'm going to say, hey, let's talk about something that kids can change. And that's their physical activity level. They can be more active. They can do more today than they did yesterday. That is available to every kid walking the earth, skinny, tall, short, fat, whatever. Every kid can do more. And we can teach pedometers. If we would spend the time teaching pedometers that we tend to use on fitness testing, kids would leave school knowing how to monitor their physical activity, how to use a pedometer, how to validate it, how to set personal goals to increase their activity level, how much time they have to use how many days they have to use to see how accurate their activity is. And we have an instrument that tracks activity on kids as well as an accelerometer, and in some studies show even better than accelerometers. And we keep dragging our feet on it. And if we could say to the principal, my goal for this year is to increase the activity of our school 1%. That would be a huge goal. We could sell that to the parents. The principal could look at it and say, we're all going to work together to increase the activity level of this school. What would be a better goal than getting all our kids in our entire school more active? And then we would count. Now, yeah, granted, so that I have a disclaimer here. Yes, I developed pedometers for about 20 years ago now. I first developed them for a company called Walk for Life. And I've developed pedometers now for a Gopher. So yes, but I am not a salesman. I don't make a penny when someone buys pedometers. I'm not paid for any equipment sales whatsoever. I have the freedom. I've been able to work for the greatest company in the world with Gopher because they have no hidden agendas with me. They allow me to be Bob Pangrazi. And you know Bob Pangrazi. He's a loose cannon. He'll say what he thinks. And Gopher has been so good to me. They let me say what I think and what I believe. And I speak with passion for this profession. But the reason principals hold your feet to the fire with fitness is because we never offer them anything different as a profession that's meaningful. And the only thing that is meaningful in the long haul is physical activity and learning to monitor it and being a physically active human being. Because I'm going to ask you, how many people do you know in their 20s? Okay, let's say 30s. Okay, let's say 40s that go out and do the fitness test on themselves all the time if that's such an important experience. And again, I'm not contrary to that experience if it's used wisely with kids, because you've got to learn that, yeah, there is fitness and it is an entity and there are things about it. But there are lots of people who walk around who couldn't pass all elements of the fitness test who are still pretty doggone fit and being active every day and doing some really great things. So, you know, let's use some common sense is all I'm asking for. I'm not asking to get rid of anything. I'm asking to use some common sense.
Right, and as you mentioned earlier, all our students are maturing at different levels as well. So to kind of hold them all accountable to one standard it's not necessarily the best way to do that. But yeah, I agree. There is that one thing that they can do, which is increase their physical activity. Now, how would you encourage that to also, outside of the school boundaries? How would you encourage them to be physically active outside of school, even at home, even maybe with their families?
Great question. And that's where it really has to go. Now, the question probably is, where should it go? Should they go out in elementary school? Should they go out in middle school? Should they go out in high school? Well, I probably would get them out of the school environment early. But I do think that kids have to work with pedometers for a year or two, probably fourth or fifth grade, or fourth and fifth grade, and get really used to them so they wear them like a wristwatch. And you get them active a little at a time. You do PE first, and then 1 week you let them do them during the school day and turn them back in at the end of the school day. Ultimately, the goal is to send them home and let them do there. We're testing a program this fall in high school, and I'll be able to get the results to you if you want to talk to me at a later time. But what we're doing is sending them home. To get valid data about a kid's activity level, you need at least 4 days of activity. It doesn't have to be consecutive, but at least 4 days of activity with elementary kids and 8 days with secondary kids. So at the high school, we're going to give each class the pedometers for 2 weeks, and they're going to wear them around the clock, bring them in, upload them, because this school has PE every day. And we're going to grab 4 days of data each week. So they pick them up on Monday, turn them back in on Friday, and then pick them up the following Monday, go to Friday. So we have 8 days of data. Now we can start to do some goal setting. The first question out of a teacher's mouth is, well, what are we going to do when we lose them? Well, let me ask you questions. Do you lose books? Do you lose pencils? Do you lose computers? Do you lose iPads? This is a $25 instrument. And when we lose stuff, when we lose computers, for example, we make the kids, they have to buy insurance. Well, we don't need insurance for pedometers, but I said, just to put the teachers at ease, I said, I'll guarantee you have enough pedometers, okay? That if you lose some, I'll take care of it for the sake of the study. I honestly believe, and the PE teacher does now because she's used them with these kids for 2 years, she honestly believes she's not going to lose many. Now, she may miss a day of data. That's a whole different thing. They forgot to put them on when they got up. Mm-hmm. That kind of stuff is no big deal, but she really believes that she's not going to lose many. And she's been using pedometers in the high school now for 3 years, and I think she's lost a total of 3 pedometers. A lot more of them have, you know, broken or been lost than been stolen. I mean, been broken then lost. I mean, it's just a fact of life. We put up too many barriers to new things. We try to make excuses as to why it won't work here in Joe Blow High School. It just won't work here. We're a lot different. Oh, we're down in Texas. We're a lot different than you are in Arizona. And,
Right.
yeah, and you know, Arizona's a lot different than Washington. No, it's not. We're all the same.
Mm-hmm.
We got the same problems.
Yeah, and you know, I did a similar activity. It must have been about 8 years ago now. We had a 3-point play um, program here in Houston, um, and it was sponsored by the Magic Johnson Foundation. And we had pedometers for all of our kids. I think it was, I want to say it was 4th grade. So we gave them to all our 4th grade kids, and they did the same thing. They took them home. You know, they used them 24 hours a day if they could. We put them on in the morning. And then every morning, the classroom teacher, they just marked down how much, or it was part of their morning routine. So the student would mark down on a piece of paper how much steps they had, reset it, and then start over for that day. And it was great. We did it for probably a month. And so we had a lot of data. And the kids loved it. The kids absolutely loved it. And we didn't have a lot of them stolen or lost. Like you said, most of them were broken because they would try to, you know, do something they probably weren't supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
They rolled on them and broke them or whatever that might be. A couple of them were lost, but we didn't really have to replace too many. But it was amazing. The motivation of the students shot up like dramatically. They loved using the pedometers and then being able to monitor, you know, their activity in real time. So yeah, I would love to, you know, have you back on and maybe talk about that study when you complete it.
Yeah, and you know, we've come a while from a distance from when you did it, because you know, with our new FitStream pedometers that we're going to be using in this study, they
Mm-hmm.
just walk by the little upload unit and they just push a button and it's all uploaded and the pedometer is cleared. That's how easy it is. So
Oh, that's
there's
awesome.
no recording, no playing with them, nothing. You just push the button and move on.
That's awesome. Yeah, with these, they were a little I wouldn't want to say cheap, but they were kind of cheap pedometers.
Yeah,
But all the same, we got some really good data out of it.
I bet you did.
So we're at the end of the hour. So I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show and talking with us and sharing some of your wisdom of the experience that you have in you know, health and physical education. And I want to leave you with the last word. So if you have any kind of last message for our audience, please feel free to leave it with us.
My last words always come from my heart, and that is thank you and all your peers and all your fellow teachers for being teachers. I trained teachers for a career, and I loved it. There's nothing I enjoyed more than training new teachers and experienced ones on the job. And you guys, all you physical educators, are the fabric of our society. And when you do a great job, you change kids more than any other human being in that school. And I can't thank you enough what you do for our society, that you give kids hope and that you give parents hope that their youngster will be successful. And I just think PE teachers are the most important person in the school, and I thank you for what you do.
All right. Thank you.